It seems as we continue to advance and grow as a culture, it's been kind of my observation, and I'm sure this has been said before and in different times and in different places, but I'll say it, at least my observation for us right now, is it seems like it's becoming easier and easier for us to actually isolate ourselves. Now, certainly in the past, one could do that if they wanted to. They could go off, out into the wilderness. They could build a little hut somewhere. You could go to as far away as you want. You go to like far distant places, like all the way Chanhassen or something really far away, in those kind of places. But that's the way that you had to isolate. But it's just been my observation, and I don't say this accusatorily as if I don't participate in this, okay? I also want to make sure that that's clear. I am guilty of this as well. But it's becoming easier and easier for us even to isolate ourselves even within cities, where people are quite literally even in complexes living on top of one another, but yet even are able to isolate ourselves all the more. Just a little casual observation of mine that I just find kind of interesting. I grew up in the suburbs. But isn't it interesting, when you look at houses that were built in, say, the more core of the cities that were built, say, in the 1920s, where do you find the porches? This is a participatory homily. Where do you find the porches? On the front, right. Now the ones that are built, where do you find the porches? In the back. Isn't that interesting? The front porch, where the sidewalks are. The people walk by, sipping their lemonade, give a little hay, Now we put our porches in the back. But even this too, I'm at our seminary and I live on in a college campus that's there too. And now certainly, admittedly, when Apple came out with their earpods or their AirPods, was I one of the first to get them? Oh yeah, I was. Those are really cool. But it's interesting how now, it's almost ubiquitous to see the AirPods worn almost 24/7. And you see this too as it isolates. And I'll sometimes ask others, and I'll even ask myself, why am I wearing these? Why am I isolating? Well, the world's kind of annoying. Has anybody ever wanted to tune out the whole world? Yeah, I think we all have at times. But one of the things that's catastrophic about that, so I'm not condemning AirPods. You will not find mine on eBay tonight. Maybe tomorrow after I pray with my own homily, But you notice this too, that there's this temptation, and a growing temptation even, to try to expect the world to really ultimately kind of conform to me. We now can select whatever music fits our personal desires, our personal tastes. We don't have to share music with anyone like we used to on the radio. We now can watch exactly the movies that are curated for me. And even now, as we move into this era of artificial intelligence, which I've experimented with a fair amount, it's kind of interesting. I can even create an artificial friend that does and says exactly what I want to hear. I don't have to worry about somebody else. And there's a temptation to move even more deeply into this. Now, again, I'm not saying a universal condemnation of technology or any of these things. As a matter of fact, there's amazing ways that they can be used. And we have great examples, even within our own state. Father Mike Schmitz and Bishop Barron and those who are using it. So don't hear this as a condemnation or that we all need to now go join an Amish colony, okay? Don't hear it as that. But rather, I bring that up for all of us, again, myself included, to hear about and notice, just to notice the temptations and the ease with which we can say, you know what, others are kind of bothersome and don't fit me perfectly and my desires in this moment, so why don't I just block them out? Why don't I just put them off to the side, and then I can be alone with everything that I want? Now, with that in mind, it's important for us to hear this gospel. Now, admittedly, it was the long version that we read there. But I think it's important for us to pay attention because Jesus says a few things in here that I think pertain directly to our culture. So Jesus is speaking to his disciples, to his followers, to you and to me. And one of the things that he doesn't encourage, it's a commandment. Notice it's written. If you're a grammar person, these are certainly in the imperative. He says, sell your belongings and give alms. And then when Peter had asked this question, if this parable that he gave was for them, he says too, in this, he gives this parable where there's a moment where a master puts a servant in charge of his property. And he says that the master who cares for the other servants will be greatly rewarded. And certainly throughout the Gospels, there's this recognition of the necessity of our faith, the necessity to go beyond ourselves and actually care for others. Yes, there are many times that the Lord repeats that and says that. We've all heard that and we all know it, but yet it's so tempting, even for us as Catholics, for us as Christians, to retreat more and more. And we say, well, Lord, this is hard. As a matter of fact, I find some of those people rather bothersome and annoying. Has anybody ever met somebody that's bothersome and annoying? If your hand's not up, it's probably you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But it's one of these things where it becomes so easy for us to isolate. But the Lord tells us these things. The Lord gives us this encouragement not to shame us, not to make us feel guilty, but he says this because he loves us and he knows this is how we were actually made and designed to live. And so, too, we sometimes struggle. How can I find that heart? How can I find that desire to actually serve others? How can I find that one to look past and go beyond the annoyances of others and really say, I want to encounter you. I want to know you. I want to ultimately love you. Well, I think one of the easiest examples is actually our saint, the patron saint of our parish here today, St. Lawrence. Now, just briefly, the story of St. Lawrence. So he was born in the 200s in Rome. And up until the mid-300s, Christianity, to be a Christian, was illegal. Now, if you read through the different emperors to different degrees, some really kind of didn't care. It was officially on the books. And other ones really clamped down on that, to the point where various emperors would even make it an executable offense. And this is the world into which St. Lawrence was living. So St. Lawrence didn't become a priest, but he did become a deacon of the church. And certainly at that time, and we know this from the Acts of the Apostles, that one of the first duties of a deacon was actually to help with the finances of the church. And their job was to make sure that they took in whatever donations and helped distribute that well to people who were in need. So he was in charge of the finances of the church, even in Rome. Now, again, the church was very quiet and was kind of, well, it wasn't quiet, it was going out evangelizing, but it was one that was still small. So don't think that St. Peter's Basilica had been built yet, okay? And so Lawrence was doing this. Well, the emperor found out about this. The emperor then put out an order that all clerics were to be executed. This included not only bishops and priests, but also the deacons. And so they ended up arresting St. Lawrence, and then they find out that he's in charge of the riches of the church. And so the emperor, wanting to make a show of this, wanting to make sure that it was, that publicly, the world would understand Rome is far superior to this church, to this little weird cult thing that was going on. And so he requested a public demonstration of that. So what he did is he told Lawrence, he said, you're a deacon, you're in charge of the riches of the church. All right, I'll give you 3 days to get those riches together, and then you will publicly present them to me. And so after 3 days, this happens. Lawrence comes forward, and a big crowd follows Lawrence, because they knew him to be a very prayerful and holy man. And so this crowd follows him. And then the emperor says, it is now time, Lawrence, for you to present the riches of the church. And Lawrence turns around, and all those people who were following him the poor, the crippled, the lame, he points to them and he says, "Emperor, here are the riches of the church." The emperor, in his fury of being seemingly publicly humiliated, ordered that Lawrence not just be killed in a simple way, but that he literally be grilled alive. And of course, many of you probably know his famous line that he said as he was being grilled alive, he yelled out, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side." You know. But there's something very powerful. By the way, if you do travel to Rome today, you can actually go to a church. They still have the grill that he was chained in, and you can actually go see that's there. But notice how Lawrence, in his diaconal ministry, in his beautiful faith, saw that the whole mission of the church was to bring these people along. He had this beautiful faith that he looked at the others who were there. And society, remember at that time, saw the poor, the widow, the cripple, the lame. He saw all of them. The society saw them as annoyances and wanted to get rid of them. Lawrence saw them as the riches of the church. Why? Because Lawrence knew that these people were so beloved by God. And that becomes then, too, our great calling. To recognize that, yes, people sometimes can be a challenge. And that means that God loves them all the more. And thanks be to God for that, because you can ask my mom, and I have been and continue to be a challenge. Especially ask my little sister. She'll give you a list of things. But this is the beauty of who God is. Now imagine if we too can allow ourselves to think and pursue and to live in such a way. Now, I wish I could say, hey, just say this prayer one time and instantly you're going to see everybody as beautiful and loved by God and you're going to have a desire to go out of your way. I wish I could promise you that, but it's likely not going to happen that way. Rather, it's going to happen in the same way that we build up muscle. It's going to be us trying it out. Being people who say, yes, I'm going to go out of my way and try to help others. Try to live in this way. You know, you think about it. I remember the very first time, for a period of time, I was really into weightlifting. And it was one of these things, and I remember with weightlifting, I don't know if anybody's had this experience. So I was assigned at St. Thomas Academy in this high school. And it's an all-guys military high school. Now, when people ask me, "Oh, Father, when you were in high school, you know, what did you play? You know, when you went to the football game, you know, what did you play?" And I was like, "The trombone," you know. Okay, this was me, all right. So the weight room was a very, very scary place for me. You know, you hear all this clanging and banging that's down there, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on down there?" And even some of these guys, I mean, we even had one kid, his name was Big Rig, and boy, when he got under there for squatting, he was one who was going to squat like 500 pounds, and I'm like, oh, that's intimidating. But finally, I worked up the courage, and I was like, okay. And there was this guy, Matt, who was down there in the weight room, and he was kind of in charge of it. And I said, "Matt, this place terrifies me. Can you help me out?" And Matt's like, "Yeah, absolutely," you know. And, you know, as he puts down his steak, and like, "Yeah, let's go." And I'll admit, at first it was really embarrassing. I just started with the bar, and that's literally all that I was doing. I was just learning the motion I was going through. But by the end of my time there, I was really, really enjoying weightlifting, and it was something that I thoroughly found, wow, this was good and this was easy. Was it still hard at times? Absolutely. Were there days that I was like, I don't have it, and I had to, you know, go smaller? Yeah. But it took time, it took energy, it took going into it, it took finding people to help me out to do this. And it also took then, too, a little bit of humility, and a lot. Well, I use that as an analogy for even for us going outside of ourselves. We live in a time and a place, as I mentioned at the beginning, that really encourages us to isolate, encourages us to just worry about yourself. We're going to have to be a people who say, all right, this is going to be hard and this is going to be awkward, but you know what? I'm going to go outside of myself. I'm going to look for the people that the Lord is putting in my life, and I'm going to try to help them. And then, too, There can be the people in your life that you know who already do this well. Can you be somebody who reaches out to them and says, you know what? I feel this stirring in my heart that I really need to go out and help the poor. I need to help those around me, but I don't know how. Don't use that as an excuse, because as Jesus even said in our gospel, those who know what they should be doing and don't do it will be the ones to receive a pretty severe punishment. Well, if we know that, we have to be a people who say, all right, let's go try it. Let's go find out. And guess what? Likely, the first time that you go out of your way to try to help others, the first time that you say, hey, you look like you're in need, can I pray with you? And the first time that you do it, you'll probably do it pretty poorly. But guess what? That's okay. I think it was G.K. Chesterton who said, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Now, he didn't mean that as an excuse to do it poorly, but he said if it's worth doing, even if you can't do it perfectly, guess what? It's still worth doing. And what we're going to find out is what a beautiful thing it is. We're going to be able to have the same joy that St. Lawrence had. Because see, the way that St. Lawrence lived his life allowed him to make a joke even when he was dying. He couldn't make that joke probably when he started in his faith, but because of the way he lived and the trust and the beauty of growing in his relationship with God and his church, he was so at peace facing his own death that he could make a joke about it. Because he knew he was living in such a way that when he met Jesus face to face, literally in just a few moments, he was going to meet somebody who truly loved him. And how powerful would that be for us? So as we continue to pray and deepen our own faith and our own relationship with Jesus Christ, let us have the courage. Let us have the courage to go outside of ourselves, to recognize the goodness and the treasure that is all these other people. And let us live and help and serve in whatever ways we can for them. And then too, at the end of our lives, we'll be able to hear those beautiful words from Jesus who says, well done, my good and faithful servant. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world.